Hi, everyone. Welcome to this interview this morning. This is interview number 5 of our 12 days of conversation. I'm your host. I'm Gail Scott of Boise International. And the point of these interviews is, why am I talking to people right in the run up to Christmas? Well, I'm a spiritual teacher, I'm a coach, and I decided that it would be helpful for you out there to really begin to be inspired by some people, certainly here in the Toronto, Ontario area, that I know, that I have known personally and professionally, people who are on this path of purpose, people who know how to live passionately and come from an energy of play. And that's what I'm all about. And so today it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to one of my mentors and friends, and that is Susan Sommers. Susan, welcome to the show this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Susan, for those of you who get my newsletter, which you can get if you subscribe on my website, boseinternational.com, you will have read a little bit this morning about Susan. Susan has been a media marketing expert in her, let's say, earlier life. And then in the last couple of decades, she's really transitioned into being a teacher and an aid for others who are traveling through a kind of fitness spiritual journey. And so she's going to tell us a little bit about that in a little bit. But my first question for you this morning, Susan, is how do you keep your energy up from one day to the next? Like, what's your general attitude about your energy when you start each day? And is there something that you do each day that has you in the space that you want to be in? Tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a Sagittarius, which means I didn't want every day to look like the next. So I really resisted routine. But as soon as I started to put a morning routine into my life, then I started to have that satisfaction, get that energy, and open my day. So my morning routine is absolutely the best. Before I even eat, I, believe it or not, do 2 or 3 crossword puzzles and then meditate. And then I have my breakfast, and then I get dressed. So just when I'm out of that routine, I see it makes a difference. So I would say that gives me the energy to go out there. And then just revitalizing myself through nature during the day gives me the energy as well.
Right, right. And so do you have any particular resources? Like you said, you do crossword puzzles. Like, do you collect them, or is that something you do online? Do you do them online, or do you
I
do
do
them
them
in a book?
online.
Oh,
And it's
really?
a crossword puzzle, and I can't remember the name offhand, but I take the easy ones, and I always do 2, and then I'm so competitive, I have to see how long it took me to do them, right at the end. But yeah, so that has been my inspiration, is doing these crossword puzzles, because as I age, I know that my mind is, it's going to lose some of its resilience. So I want to keep and then I also take Spanish. I took Spanish years ago, and so I do Duolingo, and I just read the stories, and then I go back to the stories. So those are the Spanish and the crosswords are probably the 2 things I do for my brain.
Wow. So that's amazing. So you're really keeping those neural pathways and those neurons firing as you're, on a daily basis, basically. Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic. So today I want to talk a little bit about your journey, because, you mentioned before, and as I mentioned in your introduction, you were in the world of business, a very successful entrepreneur with your own company. And then something happened in your, late 50s when you joined the Y. So talk a little bit about what happened at that time in your life to help us.
It's interesting because the 2 worlds intersected. I really was not into physical fitness. I was a bit overweight. I was smoking. I got divorced. All those things happened in my 40s and my early 50s. And then I got a job at a YMCA business center. So it fit in with my business background as the marketing coach. And I was the one who organized the workshops and did the one-on-one coaching. So after 2 years of being there part-time, I went full-time, and I got 2 free Y memberships for my husband and I. And what's interesting, I'll tell you about my story, but what's interesting about him is he found out that he was an elite runner, and he has done 12 marathons, including 2 Bostons, from that Y membership. So I started going to the Y, I started walking around the track, I started lifting, going to some weights classes, and then I entered my first race at 59. And it was down in the beaches. It was it was an hour, so it was a 5K. And at the end, I went home, had a glass of wine, and went to sleep. And then 2 weeks later, I got a set of shoelaces and a certificate telling me that I'd come in first in my age group. And if you know anything about me, which you do, Gail, I'm competitive. So that's all it took to get me started. So over the next number of years, until now, 25 years, I have done 35 races, including
Wow.
2 7.5-hour marathons.
Wow. And so did you find then that, so you said, you know, that competitive nature that you had, did you find it easy to really begin to incorporate the fitness into your life? Like, how did you do that when you had not had that kind of experience earlier on? I mean, you were there to do a job, you were there to facilitate their workshops, but then how did you build the training and the fitness into your life that hadn't been there in the past? What was that like?
Well, I joined the YMCA Fitness Center. And I lived north of the fitness center, and every morning I got in my car and went there to do a class. And I really created an amazing group of women who really helped me, you know, accountability team, and became very friendly with them and went into a couple of races with them. So I would say without those classes and without those group of women, I probably would not have been able to do it on my own.
So, you know, really the structure of the exercise routine in your schedule, and then the ease of being able to do those classes, and then also the community that was built up with those people. So that sounds like that was a very integral part to your success. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. And one woman, Pat McMonagle, actually went into the 2 marathons with me and stayed with me for an hour each time to help me just to move along. So yeah, so they were even there for the races that I was in.
Right. So having the accountability with these other individuals, and then having the company and support of them. So you mentioned as well, your husband is an elite runner. And so is that something that you guys do together? Do you go and walk and run together?
Well, neither one of us, he doesn't run anymore.
Right.
But what was interesting was, talk a little bit about El Camino, the fact that during COVID, I couldn't do my in-person races. So I decided to sign up online for an online race. And here in back of me are all the awards that I've gotten, all the badges from the different online races. And so I signed up for El Camino de Santiago, something I'd always wanted to do in person and had never done. So 778 kilometers, 15,000 steps a day. He was with me because he wasn't working at the time. From June of last year till October, we walked ravines, neighborhoods, waterfront, anything just to get my steps, right? So he was with me throughout that journey. And that was really very special because I don't know if I would have committed. I don't know if every morning I would have gotten up and done that if it weren't for that. And then he went back to work. So
Right. So, you know, and now there's another one of those gifts that I mentioned last week about this whole pandemic situation, where so many people I hear, you know, are talking about so many negative things, and yet I have not had that experience personally. And here you are sharing a very personal story about your life with your husband, which would not have happened had you
absolutely.
not been in that kind of energy. Now, I know that you're also, you know, you mentioned that you meditate. So take us on that journey of you discovering meditation. How did you discover that that was a thing for you? Because I know it wasn't earlier on in your life, right? So share with us what that journey was. How did that
Well,
happen?
it's interesting because I've gone on a number of cruises, actually 2 a year, for maybe for about 6 or 7 years. And on one of those cruises, the speaker was from the Art of Living Foundation, which is based in India, and he spoke about all kinds of meditation and face yoga, things that I just wasn't familiar with. And each day for about 4 days, I went to listen to him speak. And then I asked him where he was from and found out a little bit about it, found out who was the contact in Toronto. And my last book and this book actually includes some of the information from that. So I went from really having no understanding of meditation or yoga to having a little bit. And then I went to the retreat center in Quebec, in Montreal, for a week and learned about breathing. This for me was totally new. So the only thing that I really haven't done so far is the silence meditation, which is something I'm hoping next summer I'll be able to go. But if you can imagine a Sagittarius like me to slow down and be focused, and that's how it started. And then I just started to incorporate the meditation into my day.
And so what about this breathing? Tell me what you learned about the breathing. Like, what's something that you could share with the people who are listening and watching that you've learned that's been, you would say, kind of a game changer for you? What about the breathing part? Because, we all breathe. So what's different about it?
Well, I try to concentrate on breathing. Like I'll breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, and breathe out for 4 counts, or something like that. I try to have these different ways of doing it so that I'm just aware. I don't think I was that aware of breathing or other things about my body until I started to really slow down and focus and get involved with the breath. So the breath is so important, but we just take it for granted.
Right. And how would you think that has actually helped you in this walking journey that you've undertaken basically now as a lifestyle? Has the breath come into it when you're out there walking?
Yes, I think it has. And it slows me down and focuses me.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're breathing, that's what you're concentrating on, right? So yeah,
Right.
definitely I've changed from someone who would go into races and just want to finish fast, which by the way, I could never do. I was always near the back, right? But I still kept plugging on, to somebody who now can just go into a race or walk in a ravine and just be in the moment. I'm
Right.
in the moment now, and then I started taking photos and to capture the moment. So it's been a real experience for me.
Mm-hmm. And so was there a moment in that journey, when you said, well, I started taking photographs, was there something in particular that happened or something that you saw that had you start to do that made it different? What happened there?
Well, I think it was actually Facebook, because I was on Facebook, but really not posting anything. And so when I started doing these walks for El Camino, I started to take photos and I started to post them. And because I see myself as a writer, and I've always seen myself only as a writer and not particularly visual, it just was a whole new experience, because I would post them and people would comment, where was that? Or I love that photo, or oh, the lighting was so nice. And I started to realize that I was more visual than I thought. And I think that's what we do too. We limit ourselves. We give ourselves a label, like I did, a writer, and then block out anything that could be not fit into that. So that was the beginning. When I did El Camino, I started to look around. And I wanted to show
Right.
other people in Toronto, for example, what Toronto was like, or other places, right?
Right.
So,
Now, I know you've written a new book, The Magical Art of Walking, or the Magic of Walking. So, tell us what had you decide to write another book, because you already had several other books that were very successful. What was different about this book?
well, it was funny because there were two things that my other books didn't have. One was a memoir. I really didn't have a lot about myself. I'd avoided that. And the other one was the photography, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the third thing was I'd never really written a lot about mental and spiritual walking. Because as I mentioned, when you're somebody who's used to going into races, you see yourself as a walker who is a physical walker, right? So this was new. And I thought to myself, during COVID, I started thinking, are there other ways that I've walked over the years? And I started to realize that, for example, I grew up in New Jersey, so I mall walked and I ravine walked. And then the mental was when my mother had Alzheimer's in California, I would go into trails and paths just to alleviate some of the stress that I was feeling. And when I started to look at the ways I walked, I realized that the physical was just the beginning, but then I had moved into the mental and the spiritual. And I started walking with a friend of mine from 40 years. We started to walk in the ravine in the mornings. And I'd always been a walker alone. And suddenly there I was with someone else. And I was seeing it through her eyes.
So it sounds like, this purposeful way of walking was something that was really already always there in your life. You just noticed it once you started to put together the book, or realize that, oh, actually, I'm already a walker.
It was funny because when I go to California to visit my brother who lived north of LA, he'd go to work, and every morning I'd walk out the door and I had 3 or 4 directions that I would go in, and I would just walk for an hour. And I didn't really think about what I noticed along the way until I started thinking those were the walks that were more mental and spiritual, because I was alone and I would notice the color of the flower, or I would notice the rocks along the way. So it was just me and me. And it was when I started to do this book that I thought, well, of course I've done more than walking to cross the finish line. And that, I think, was what happened.
And you mentioned, noticing the flower, noticing the rock, and it was me and me. And I love that, because I know for myself, when I started my tantric training earlier in around 2013, and I actually started doing what you're talking about, going for walks by myself. And I would notice, the bee inside the flower, and I would notice the different shades of green of the trees. And I would realize, oh my goodness, this is what Tantra is all about. It's about being in the senses and really feeling and sensing everything that's happening in the moment as you're having that experience. So it sounds like that's what you created in those experiences, not really knowing that you were connecting with a higher self of yourself when you said, it was me and me. That's a very telling thing to say. Me and me. People don't say that. I was walking with me and me. So tell us a little bit more about that. What have you discovered about you and you, and about who you are now at this point in your life?
Well, I want to mention that I also have a Fitbit. And if anybody, and I absolutely love my Fitbit because it tracks my steps. So what's good about the Fitbit with me and me is that I can look and see I've only done this number of steps, so it really sort of keeps me motivated, but it also tells me I have a ways to go, right?
Right.
The me and me, like with the waterfront in Toronto, it's so beautiful. And as I said, when I started taking the photos, I started really noticing more what it was like. And then you realize the other people who are there. And this is something that doesn't cost any money. It's just you being there in the moment. So that for me slowed me down and really got me focused.
Now, what would you say to someone who has tried to do this kind of experience? They've tried to go walking, they've tried to meditate, they've tried to connect to their, to them and them, let's say. What would you say to them now as a mentor or a proponent of this experience? How would you encourage someone to maybe deal with some of the negative self-talk that might come up, or kind of self-sabotage around maintaining this kind of lifestyle?
Well, it gets back to what I said about the routines before as well, right? That you really, like I walk first thing in the morning, so it really doesn't matter when. But I would say create a routine and open the door and just go. And then go for a certain amount of time. And the other thing is I have to change my routes all the time. I'm the kind of person who needs a lot of variety. So knowing that, I make sure that I have a number of routes that I can go, and I'll go get a coffee, or I'll go with something in mind at the end, pick up a book at the library, whatever it may be, but some goal that will get me from here to there, or I'll go just to see what are the what are the birds in the ravine one day, right? So
Right.
yeah. So, but I think you have to make it a habit. That's probably the main thing.
And did you realize before you started writing this book that there even was a spiritual and a mental component to this? Like, did you have that awareness before you started writing the book?
No, but what I did know is that I'd already written 2 books that were mainly physical fitness.
Right.
I'd written 2 books for women. So when I thought, I knew I wanted some memoir, but I didn't want a whole book of memoir. And I knew it couldn't be the same as the other 2. And the other 2 books I wrote with another woman. So this made me focus more on myself, right? So therefore, I just knew it had to be different. So it was just a fluke that I thought to myself, well, I'm now going into the ravine to walk. So I guess that's maybe spiritual. And then I started looking at the photos. So it was really, that was the way it came about, that I never thought of myself as anything other than a physical walker. Here's my goal. I finish it. I finish the race or whatever, and that's it, right? That moved me into this, that I became more aware. And COVID helped because I really didn't have a lot of other things to do than to be in the moment.
Right. And I think for many people, we've existed in an energy of action and reaction and result. And you mentioned about having goals, and I do think that it is important to have goals in life and have purpose. You mentioned about making sure that there's something that you might have to do at the end of your walk to make sure that there's purpose to it. But the idea of just being in life now, not always doing, but just recognizing that sometimes it's just being in the present moment where you are actually doing something. You're being in the present moment.
And the other thing that I've done is I've celebrated. This is between me, and I've started to do that much more. That I'm much more aware of what I've done, right? Oh, look at that. Look, I added steps, or look at that photo, or isn't that beautiful? Or benches. I did in the book, benches I have known. I was photographing all the benches I've sat on in Toronto.
Right.
And so there's a section that's benches I've known. So even that, something as simple as that, I know where the next bench is. So it's a lot of conversation between me and myself.
Right, right. I love that. And, you could say, there's three parts of us, right? There's this me, the observer, and then there's the ego, the part of us that might be driving us, the competitive part of us, the goal-oriented part. And then there's the me, that's the soul, that's the light, that's the awareness, this present kind of place to be, right? So, I think that in the past, probably we wouldn't really have had any of this self-awareness of these different parts of us and these experiences that we're having. But here you are, you're creating it in the moment as you're going. And it's almost as if, you think about a path where the lights come on automatically as you walk down the path, right? And it sounds like that's kind of been the experience that you've had in this book, Magic of Walking. So tell us now a little bit more about this book. So what is this book that you've written? I know you said it's part memoir and it's all you. So help us understand how that might be helpful to someone.
When I envisioned the book, I thought of it as something that someone would pick up and put down. So I started my career as a researcher before I became a writer. So I wanted to include all kinds of resources. For example, where I meditate, the woman who I meditate with in the morning, that's in the book. All kinds of websites. So this book is everything about walking, right from the different kinds of walking. And it even includes something like my brother had polio and he has a walker, how to walk with a walker, right? So, it goes right from the physical stroll, walking with a baby, a dog, whatever, right through to going into how to prepare for races. And then it goes into the mental. And the mental part is everything from mood walks to walk and talk therapy, which a lot more people are doing, And then it goes into the spiritual. And if you have heard, I hope you've heard of forest bathing, but if you haven't, go online. It's a Japanese term, and the book has 50 ways to forest bathe. So everything you can do when you're in nature to be in nature, right? So that's the way I saw it. The size even is a little bit smaller. Can I get the book? Can I show the book?
Sure.
Okay,
yeah,
let me.
Sure.
Okay. So here's the book. It's called The Magic of Walking. What's interesting about the cover is it's a stock photo. It was between this photo and a photo I had taken. And the reason I wanted this photo is because I wanted someone to be drawn into a path.
Into the journey.
And I didn't want it to be winter. I wanted it to be transition time, like fall, right? So really everything, but it's like the kind of book that you pick up, you put down. And that's, it's everything from, as I said, what to buy for walking to walkable communities and how to walk when you're traveling. Right. So it really is just that kind of a book where you just have it as a resource and then you read my story and then you see the photos. It was so much fun to do, you know.
It definitely sounds like it was a passion project
Yeah.
that you created. Now, so let's shift our focus now to part of this process of doing these videos is around sharing the idea of sacred economics. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's where economics can be achieved with a win-win energy, and where it's not always about money that's exchanged, and there's always a giver and a receiver, and it's not always the way that you might think. So for every guest that I'm having here on this series, I'm asking them to come forward with something using the energy of sacred economics for you. So Susan, share with us what you've decided to offer to people here today.
Well, I always dreamed of having a half an hour or an hour with someone who's reading my book, and especially with this book, because what happens is people say, "Oh, I loved this" or "I love that," but I never really get in depth. And that's what I want to offer is a copy of my book and a one-on-one with me. It's not, I don't know, I wouldn't call it a coaching session, but a sharing session where I can find out what is someone getting out of it and how does it relate to their life. And then I can share things about my own life. It's just something that I've always wanted to do. And because I mainly do workshops and keynotes and courses, I've never really had the opportunity like I have now to just be one-on-one with someone.
Right.
So,
right. And so the energy exchange for that is, are you freely offering this to the community? Is
yes.
that how you're doing this? Right. So,
yes.
So under sacred economics, what that would mean is that there's a trust within you then that the universe will bring that energy back to you in some way, because now you're giving of your time and this product. So that's the offer for anyone who is interested, is a copy of this amazing book and an hour session with Susan.
Exactly.
And Susan will mentor you, share with you, assist you, help you in whatever area of the book that you want some assistance with. So what a fabulous offer. Thank you so much. And so for those of you who are watching this series, you know that I am also offering something with every interview that I'm doing. So I'm also offering a 1 hour session, and this session would be on a spiritual energy context. So I mentioned Tantra before, I mentioned Tantric Lifestyle. So I'm offering a session where you would have a conversation with me similar to the one that you would have with Susan. And it's around, what is a tantric lifestyle? What does it mean to live a tantric lifestyle? How does it look? What do you do? What resources would you use? Because it is actually quite different from a regular, normal 3D lifestyle. So for anyone who's interested in that, you can text me. So how do you claim these beautiful gifts? So you can text me at 416-358-1457. Again, that number is 416-358-1457. And so these are two individual offerings going to either the same person or two individual people. And if you do decide to send me a text and say, you know, I love sacred economics and I'd love the gift with Susan, or I'd love the gift with you, you actually don't have to take it yourself. You could gift it to someone else. So this is the beauty of sacred economics, is that it's really doing business differently. So you have until 12 noon tomorrow, until my next guest comes online, to be able to claim that. So whether you're watching this live or you're watching it on YouTube, please don't hesitate to send that text to me, because you may be the winner of one of those beautiful sessions. So as we close up here, Susan, first of all, thank you so much for coming today to share with us about your life, your journey, all the experiences. And I know there's so many other things that we could talk about. But what I'd ask you to leave our listeners and our viewers with is, what's one thing that you now know at this point in your life that you feel is like a real game changer for how to live your life being in the present moment? What would you say to people to kind of send them on their way? What would you suggest?
You know what? I would say be your own best friend. I mean, it's really taken me so many years to physically, mentally, and spiritually really commit to myself, be gentle with myself, cheer myself on, like just do all those things that I need to do in order to feel peaceful and settled. So really take care of yourself and talk to yourself a lot.
And
Celebrate. That's the other thing. Celebrate your successes. And it could be, gee, isn't that great what I did? It could be a small thing, but really acknowledge to yourself your successes.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that idea you mentioned earlier about making things a habit and getting into the routine of them. And so I would just add to that too, you know, and I say that for myself also, is to create that habit of celebration and acknowledgement, and the idea that we really do have to be our own best friend, kind of number one priority. And then everything flows from that.
Exactly.
So wonderful. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, thank you. Gail, you know, I have to thank you. You always inspire me and you always stretch me.
Oh, well, thank you. I stretched myself too, but thank you for sharing that. So thank you for being here. Don't forget to tune in, same time, same place tomorrow. And love you all so much.
Thank you.